Good evening and thank you for joining us. My name is Delaney Scott and I am so pleased to be hosting tonight's episode of Democratic Television, where we discuss current issues that connect with democratic ideals. On tonight's show, we will be discussing the Police Advisory and Review Committee, perhaps better known as PARC. PARC is a civilian oversight committee that provides a check on the City of Knoxville Police Department and gives citizens a mechanism to air their grievances and report any perceived wrongdoings on the part of KPD. PARC also serves to help strengthen the relationship and bond between law enforcement and the people they serve. Mayor Victor Ashe created this committee by executive order on September 22, 1998. We are very fortunate to have on the most well-versed person on this subject, the Executive Director of the Police Advisory and Review Committee, Mr. Clarence Vaughn III. Clarence has been the Executive Director of PARC since May of last year, but before his appointment as Director, he was still very active in the community and involved in the world of banking. Thank you for joining us, Clarence.
Thank you for having me. It's truly a pleasure. Thank you.
So we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time, so let's dive right in. Can you give us a brief background and history of PARC?
In the dates you gave, as far as in reference to Mayor Victor Ashe making an executive order back in September 22nd, 1998, it's pretty paramount to what was going on during that time in the city of Knoxville. If you close your eyes and open them now, it's the same as Ferguson, same as Tulsa, Oklahoma. It wasn't as high profile in the city of Knoxville, but during that time we did have 3 African-American males lose their lives while in a police-involved shooting. That caused civil unrest in the city of Knoxville, where you had a lot of your clergy. People may know, be familiar with some names like the Reverend Harold Middlebrook, the late Mr. Vaughn Rollins Sr., some of our local city councilmen, and all collectively came together and charged Mayor Victor Ashe to say, hey, we need something that's going to not only hold our police accountable, but also give our citizens a voice. And that's what PARC was created. Initially was created through what was called the Mayor's Commission on Policing, because police already have a lot of oversight. And if you look at the internal police structure, you have a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, a chief. Yeah. You also have internal affairs. Then outside of that, you have the TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, Supreme Court. So there's so many levels you can go up for oversight, where law enforcement during that time, it was like, why do we need to have civilian oversight, especially citizens who are not sworn officers? So they had to make it to where what's going to be the benefit for both law enforcement and the community. So the Mayor of Commission on Policing was something created by Mayor Victor Ashe with Mr. Bernie Bernstein, founder of Bernstein and Stair Law Firm. We created what was called the Bernstein Commission. And to make a long story short, between the Bernstein Commission, the Mayor's Commission on Policing, they gave the what, when, where, how PARC is going to be implemented, but also they got the wins and the interests of the community to say not only do we need this, but this would be a great service to our citizens to have a voice and have a resource such as PARC.
What important work there that they did, right? So can you explain a little bit about what that phrase is that you were talking about, civilian oversight? What does that actually mean, and what power or authority does it have?
Well, civilian oversight has been in our country since 1933, even a little bit before that time. Back then they would call them ombudsmen, just police liaisons. It didn't really become more of a hot topic or urgent matter until the Rodney King verdict. Those may not be familiar with Rodney King. It was a police brutality case involved with Mr. Rodney King back in the mid-90s or late 90s. So after that time, the federal government made it where it was a consent decree for mainly cities in the West Coast, Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, to have a civilian review board, because they were like, Mayor, Chief of Police, how is this going to happen on your watch? Right. We want to make sure you're not just profiling or subjugating a particular demographic of your citizenship. We want you to have these certain templates in place. That's what the consent decree stands for. And civilian oversight, a lot of civilian oversight got its birth through consent decree from the federal government. Fortunately, here in the city of Knoxville, we were created through community involvement. So civilian oversight is really what it says. The biggest thing is about holding police accountable, but also holding our citizens accountable, making sure they're educated about laws, practices of the police department. It's also about building relationships and building that bridge where it's fully transparent. So we have transparency between law enforcement and the community, so where we can have that conversation, have that dialogue, And also building trust is the biggest thing. Building trust between communities who are impacted heavily by encounters with law enforcement, to build that trust between them, and also for law enforcement not to automatically assume or guess that this person may be something that they're not because they're from a particular community or may have a particular background. So civilian oversight works in that, and then as far as the legal definition, as far as we have the power to investigate and review any complaints against alleged misconduct of the law enforcement. So for us here for the Knoxville Police Department. And then we also review any internal affairs units closed cases. By charter, we review those. We don't further investigate, but we can review closed cases and give that recommendation to the chief of police.
Okay, and you were talking about the trust. What is the level of trust, would you say, in the community right now?
I would say that's something that we always can work on and improve, especially in underprivileged communities that typically have more interaction with law enforcement. To be honest, the trust can improve. I mean, and that's, you got to think about years and years of history with law enforcement. I mean, you have some children who are now adults who grew up in the home when they saw a mom or dad pulled out by law enforcement, or what they would think in their mindset, that their families were separated because this officer came in and arrested my dad, and now we're struggling. So I've heard those conversations from a lot of people. I grew up in a neighborhood similar to that, so I can understand that. So it's work to be done, but I would say as far as trust, you always can work on that by having programs like PARC. The things that Chief Roush is doing with KPD being out in the community helps to bridge that gap, but it's still a lot of work to be done with building trust.
Well, you have the committee of PARC, and so what are the qualifications for the people to be on the committee for PARC, and what's the approval process for them?
Yes, thank you. We have the committee, so we have 7 members that serve on our board. They all are appointed by the mayor, so Mayor Madeline Harrell appoints all of our board members. Typically, Mayor Harrell works through India Kincannon, who takes in the names and provides them to the mayor, but they need to have a sense of fairness. Preferably live in the city or have some influence here in the city. Influence being that they serve on other boards that really focus on matters of social justice, matters of community involvement. They also have to be registered to vote in Knox County. And those are the primary requirements, but the mayor does make that decision. So the qualifications, in some form, most of them on our board currently have a law enforcement background. Some have a law, possibly being lawyers at this current time, so a law background. And some are just citizens. So it's not particular on qualifications, it's a matter of interest, and it's a matter of how much have they served and how much service have they provided to the city of Knoxville to make sure they can be stakeholders for something so sensitive when you're dealing with law enforcement.
Yeah, you want somebody that's aware of what's going on in the community. Are they term limited, and how's it set up? Is there a chairperson?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So our chair is Rosa Marr. Our former chair was Steve Fisher. He's a retired FBI agent. Rosa Marr is a community advocate. I serve on several boards, heavily involved in the city of Knoxville through Centro Espanol, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm going on and on with Rosa, but everyone really knows Rosa for her volunteerism. But yeah, so and then the committees are also, the board is broken up into 3 committees. So we have a racial profiling committee, we have an operations committee, and we also have an audio-visual committee. But they can serve up to 2 terms. Each term is 3 years, and we would love to have them serve consecutive for the 6-year term. Sometimes we do have some roll off after 3 years, but we've been very fortunate to have a strong board participation, and typically it is a 6-year commitment.
All right, and so what other cities besides Knoxville in Tennessee are involved with committees such as these?
Now, Memphis, Tennessee was the first in the state to create a civilian oversight, but they discontinued after the year that they started. So I can't give you the exact date, but I think they were a few years ahead of us. Discontinued mainly because of the backlog and the sheer volume of cases that they had in caseload when they first started.
Wow.
So then Knoxville became, in 1998, the only civilian oversight agency for the state. Memphis recently have gotten everything pretty much structured back together. Knoxville helped a lot with helping restructure that process for Memphis. And Miss Virginia Scott, I met her, she's the executive director for the Civilian Review Board there in Memphis. So they're back and running, I think, as of 2016, or 15 to be honest, but 15 or 16, I believe they started back again to have that process. So right now it's just the city of Knoxville and Memphis and the entire state that has a civilian oversight arm.
Well, then let me ask you this. Why do you think that is, that there's so few cities that consider that to be important? Are there Are there obstacles in the way of starting a civilian oversight situation?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is buy-in from the city council and also citizens too, and law enforcement, because all those three parts have to work together, from law enforcement, the community, and our elected officials. I have been in conversations with individuals from Nashville. Mm-hmm. So Nashville's actually in the process of discussing creating a civilian oversight. They recently had a police-involved shooting a few months back that ended in a tragedy where the person's life was lost. So I was actually contacted by a Metro City Councilman asking questions about PARC and how we originated here in Knoxville. So I know Nashville's in a conversation about having that. So it's a process, and I believe that civilian oversight is becoming more regularly known throughout the community and throughout the country, really. But civilian oversight agencies are now continuing to spruce up all over the country. So I can see that being something that will probably come here soon, and one of our bigger cities like Nashville may have a agency created soon too.
Well, and it sounds like you could be really helpful to get that going. You may be the leader of all of this in Tennessee.
I don't know.
So can you give us an idea of what the caseload looks like for PARC here in Knoxville?
Yes, for the first year, in 1998, when that first year, it was 272 cases. Obviously, you can see that because it was new, but also during that time, there was a lot of civil unrest. The first director was Ms. Carol Scott, and she did a great job of keeping data information with our executive assistant, Lisa Chambers, so we can go all the way back to September 22nd, 1998, and give you each case number, how many cases, what type of cases we had. So currently, our caseloads have shifted. In 2015, our caseload was 94 cases for the year, and we dropped to 87 in 2016. Maybe doing transition, because the transition to me as a new executive director. Currently, year to date, we have 67 cases. Last quarter, we had 26. And currently this quarter, we're right at about 16. So this quarter ends as of tomorrow, so I can go back and maybe have 10, hopefully not today, but if we do, we can add that to that number. So roughly, we veer around 90 to 95 cases per year. In my time there, I guess if you want to go from 2016 to now, it's roughly around that caseload for the year.
So what's the most reported complaint out of all of those?
The most common, I get that question a lot, so thank you so much, Delaney, for that. The most common complaint that we get would be what's called conduct unbecoming. That based off the code of conduct for law enforcement. The second thing would be harassment, and then failure to investigate. That's about three biggest complaints that we get. And conduct unbecoming can be the way that they felt like the officer spoke to them, if it was profanity used, if it was harsh language, if they felt like it was too abrasive in the way that the officer gave them commands. Harassment being that somebody felt profiled, not so much racial profiling, but harassment. I was wrongfully pulled over, wrongfully stopped. So there's a lot of different things that variate that. Then failure to investigate is really related to, it could be loved ones that went through a tragedy. They felt like enough wasn't done in finding that person, or enough wasn't done to get information, or was a lack of sense of urgency and follow-up time. So we investigate those, and I'm very thankful for the Knoxville Police Department, because I work heavily with Captain Eve Thomas, Lieutenant Brad Anders of the Criminal Investigations Department, and also Deputy Chief Kenny Miller, and they're very prompt with following up that information. So those would be our three main complaints, though, that we get. Mm-hmm.
And so how would a City of Knoxville resident go about filing a complaint?
Well, there's several ways. You can do it online. You go to knoxvilletn.gov/PARC, and it'll walk you through the process. I'll tell people you can just Google City of Knoxville PARC, mm-hmm. PARC, and you can do an online complaint form. We mainly get most of our forms online, complaint forms, because once you fill out the information and you click submit, that will be submitted directly to me as an email, and then I can follow back up with that person. Some people will come to the office. So we're in the City County building on the 5th floor, room 538.
Okay.
They can come to the office. We actually have, when I'm out at the office for some reason, I have complaint forms outside of my door that's in a bin that you can pick it up, fill it out, and just leave it there on the desk. So there's many ways, but preferably we like to have it either signed or submitted online, so we know that it actually came from a citizen. It's not something I'm like, oh, we have a complaint and I'm shifting it together. We want to get it from their point of view and their perspective. So either online, or you can come to the office, or you can call me. We can do a telephone consultation, but preferably either in person or online would be the two best methods.
Okay. All right, and so how does PARC go about strengthening the relationship? We were talking about trust and the level of trust. What are some ways that you have been helping to strengthen that bond between citizens and the police department?
That's another great question. I would say just being out, community outreach is very important. Being heavily involved with our local neighborhood association groups. We have our quarterly meetings where we allow KPD to have training for citizens, and just being out and being spoken. Excuse me.
So we've already talked about how the relationship is. Do you meet any resistance with the officers when you go to investigate? Would be a question of mine.
That's a great question. We still are a civilian oversight agency. So I would say from the command staff and the lieutenants and up, we have a great working relationship. And also we have a great working relationship overall with KPD. But it's the same if I was an employee or any and somebody was investigating something I was involved in. I haven't had any situations where I felt any ill will, to say the like with less words for me or for our department. But it's been an understanding to say, you know what, we don't want to hold anything back. If our officers are held accountable for something, we're fully transparent. Take this information, look at the video. So KPD has been very open. So I haven't felt any pushback, but I know it can be, obviously, because if we're investigating officers' actions, I'm sure it could be something, but I've never experienced anything. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell, excuse me, can you tell us a little bit about community policing and what that looks like? And I know that you said that you do some trainings and such.
Well, community policing for me, and my father, I didn't mention this, my father worked for I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for the Broward County Sheriff's Office for 34 years.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up not only knowing officers, but having them heavily involved in my family life. So to me, community policing is just that. We lived in a community that he worked in. From neighbors knew him, to high school coaches, to everyone knew him, so we lived in our neighborhood. If anything would happen, they would call my dad first. Instead of calling 911, they call us because they're right next door. So to me, community policing is being involved in the community you serve. Not necessarily, because I know a lot of times it's different nowadays. We may live in different zip codes, but being involved, whether it be a local church, a local community group, a local outreach ministry, a local, with KCDB, PAC, the Progressive Action Committee, just being involved where you can be felt locally as a citizen. Not just every time they see you locally is when there's a 911 call. That's why, for me, because I experienced that through my life that's why I look at as community policing, to where the community can build that trust, and I can call Delaney and say, Delaney, I have a situation. And then I know Delaney is not just Officer Delaney, I know Delaney, because I've seen Delaney at my school or a baseball game, or she was passing out Toys for Tots. So I know her personally because I've seen her on a personal level. That helps. So to me, that's the foundation of community policing before you add everything else, and that's the foundation. Building that trust of relationship is key. And I want to commend Chief David Roush. That's something he required his new recruits to do, to volunteer at our Love Kitchens, at our Salvation Armies, and involve as citizens. And then the last day after they graduated from the academy, they came back in uniform and said, hey, I'm the same person that was here this whole time. I'm just an officer.
Right.
And I'm the same. I'm just here to uphold the law, but also I'm the same person that wanted to give back to my community. So KPD is in the process of getting there, but I said we can do more, but also make sure we hold them accountable to continue that throughout their career of staying involved.
Yeah, that sounds helpful too,
yes.
to humanize the officers and then to humanize the citizens when
yes.
they meet face to face. So nationally, African American men are 3 times more likely to be targeted by the police. And adjusted for population size, is there a similar racial disparity on the reports of such things here in Knoxville?
Well, there's not. And it's shared based on demographics. We live in Knoxville. I mean, I'm originally from South Florida, so the demographics is a little bit different in South Florida. So here in the city, last time I checked, is roughly 184,000, roughly 183,000 people. Of that is 17.1% African Americans in the city of Knoxville, and I believe, and don't quote me on the statistics, but I know roughly 6% maybe of our Latino population. So with that said, for sheer numbers, versus living in Memphis or Atlanta, of course, numbers can be a little bit swayed. For us, I know for our percentage, and I have it here, for year to date, we've had 46% of our complaints come from white male and females, 24% actually more white females complaints. So females actually dominate when it comes to our highest number. Second highest would be African American females with 22%, which ties with white males. African American males, as far as the sheer number of complaints we receive, is only at 18%, so they actually have the lowest percentage. So a lot of that's dealing with demographics, to be honest. A lot of that sometimes is dealing with the individual who is the victim, if he is African American male. On some occasions, one call either be a mother that will call on his behalf, a wife, a friend of the family, an aunt. So whoever that person is as the complainant, we save that name, but it could be reference to a situation involving someone of African American descent. So
the numbers that you were quoting there, that is the complainant, the complainant
that has signed it. Yes, that's right.
Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah, that's kind of surprising that it's did you say white female?
White females is a top percentage at 24%.
And I think we should just mention because of everything that's been going on, it does seem like that there's quite a bit of work with this civilian oversight with racial issues, but there are other issues as well.
Oh yeah,
the harassment, sexual harassment, and such like that.
Oh yeah, we get issues with domestic issues. We get issues with, like you said, harassment issues, sexual harassment, improper, procedure when it comes to how you focus and deal with people. So, and I tell most people, PARC is not just for our Black and Latino community. It's for the city of Knoxville, and that's why I've been to Rotary clubs. That's why we go for each of our quarterly meetings. We go to North, East, West, and South Knoxville because we're here to serve all the citizens. Right. And it doesn't have to always be a complaint. It can simply be what we call a citizen's advocate. Somebody could be speeding through your neighborhood, and you've called the police or KPD on several occasions, and nothing's been done as quick as you would like. We can help push a little bit by getting in contact directly with those individuals as assigned to be in charge and get you a quick response time. Or it could be simply your child is coming from home, there's no crossing guard where they're crossing the street at. We can help with those issues. Same thing with crime and safety. If there's drug activity going on in your neighborhood, you want to have something done and you don't feel comfortable going to the police department, people will come to PARC. So I'm glad you said that, I try to make there's a lot of issues, of course, with a lot of racial division. Even here in Knoxville, we have it all throughout the country, but we're not just centrally focused on that. We centrally focus on how can we improve the overall relationship with our law enforcement and community.
And I'm sure they could get in touch with you about coming to a speaking engagement.
Yes.
I think you had told me earlier, neighborhood organizations, you go and speak there. You mentioned Rotary clubs and all of that, so that can be really helpful. So specifically, there was a recent incident which has garnered a lot of attention regarding Tanya Jamison, the lady from North Carolina. Could you tell us a little bit of her story, and is that resolving so far, or where are we at on that?
Well, the case is closed. It has been reviewed by our board at our past PARC meeting, which was our second quarter meeting. And the board provided some recommendations to the Knoxville Police Department. And for those who are not familiar with the Tanya Jamison case, I'll do it quickly. Young African American female from North Carolina purchased a vehicle, was in Morristown to pick it up, was there to put the tag on the vehicle, was held at gunpoint by the son-in-law of the owner, who was the mother that was not home. She filed a complaint with the attendant.
And this particular gentleman was a police officer.
Yeah, he's off-duty Knoxville Police Department officer, and she filed a complaint, of course, with the Internal Affairs Unit. Internal Affairs Unit came back and stated that the officer's actions was lawful and proper. Now, I'm skipping through a lot of things just for the sake of time.
Right.
But with that being said, it came to our board because every Internal Affairs case that's closed comes to our board for further review. So after that review, they did not concur with KPD's findings of it being lawful and proper, which would be considered exoneration for the officer. So at the meeting, they brought up a lot of concerns. We had a list of recommendations that we did provide to the chief of police and his command staff. So we've actually met on those recommendations.
Yes.
And chief provided us with feedback, how he's opening. I mean, he's definitely, that's why I said we do have a great work relationship to the point where if we have a recommendations, we don't just say, okay, that's recommendations, thank you. We sit down, we talk about it, we schedule meetings. They actually assign PARC to be a part of the Response to Resistance and Use of Force Committee, which is General Order 1.6 for KPD. We met a few weeks ago to talk about the policy, talk about how the community feels about having interaction with a police officer when a gun is drawn on them. Is that really considered use of force? And we talked about those things. Another thing that we're going to be doing quarterly training with the Knoxville Police Department about our caseload, what types of cases we have, and how those cases are related to, if it's related to racial profiling, if it's related to bias-based policing, and we're going to have those conversations that we didn't have before the Jameson case. So with the case that you brought up, it definitely shed some light on things that we can do. As far as from a policy standpoint, was the officer's actions correct by policy? Yes. But from a moral standpoint, were they correct? Many can question that. So I'm thankful for our chief of police, his command staff being willing to say, we can always improve. We can always better train our officers. We can always have that discussion, and we're doing that. So I would say at this point, it's resolved to the point where we move forward, where we're going to be even more involved and having more communication with the Knoxville Police Department about those issues.
That's good, and also you have that accountability there, and at least it didn't get swept under the rug, and perhaps we can learn from it, and we'll be safer in the community about that. So our time is running short, and so we. Where would we be able to get in touch with you?
Yes, definitely our website is, again, knoxvilletn.gov/park, or just simply Google City of Knoxville Park, that's PARC. We are located in the City County building, so if you ever need to come by and have any questions, concerns, feel free to come by. We're on the 5th floor, room 538, or simply call us at 865-215-3869. I'm always available. If not, leave a voicemail. Lastly, Facebook, you got to have social media.
That's right.
So we have a Facebook page. Please like us on Facebook. My goal is to get over 500 likes. I'm getting close.
All right,
so like us on Facebook. But on Facebook, we have recordings of all of our previous meetings, updates about our upcoming meetings, and anything related to police and community. We try to post it on our Facebook page too, so you can go either one of those options and connect with us.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate that, and maybe we can talk more on a future show as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. And so we'll be wrapping up. I just wanted to mention a few events that are going to be coming up. We are going to be having field organizer training series. That's KCDP and TNDP are leading a series of trainings to prepare volunteers to be successful on the ground. That's on September the 30th from 9 to 1. And that's at Central Labor Council on Bill Williams Avenue. And KCDP Progressive Action Committee Social, that is going to be at the last days of Autumn Brewing on Magnolia Avenue. That is October the 2nd from 7 to 10. And the Knoxville Blue Dots are having an evening with James Mackler. He's the Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate from Nashville. And he was at the Truman Day dinner. I encourage everybody to come and meet him. He's very forthcoming. He's got a great story, and you can learn a lot about him and the issues that he's running on. That's on Thursday, October the 5th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria on Jackson Avenue. So we thank you so much for tuning in to Democratic TV, and we hope you have a good evening.